Hello friends, myself Professor Ashish Singh Bhatia. Welcome to the today's session. In today's session we are going to learn about sessions in Servlet context. This video contain audio support also, so you can turn on your audio devices. We would be looking into what is session, why we need session, and how we can do it. In the next successive video, we will look into a practical example of how to create a session using a servlet and how to retrieve data using a session. If you want to read my blog, you can be reached at openfreeidea.wordpress.com. You can look into my website aspspace.in. Now let us start today's sessions, that is about the what is sessions. So let me start. So first question is why we need session. We required session because the HTTP itself is a stateless protocol. Stateless means that it does not maintain any states between a request from a client. Client gives a request, in our case browser normally puts on a request for a web resource. Server responds to that request and sender response and closes the connection and forgot about the client. If the same client is again requesting the connection, for HTTP it is a very new connection and it cannot identify that this is an old connection, or it is in a same browser that is requesting the resource again. It cannot maintain the states. So every time we have an context information missing, especially when we want to have hold of some kind of a transactions where we want client to interact again and again and we want to store it data. A best example is a shopping cart example where user from browser puts some information, buy some purchase, add it in a cart, then it can modify, add, delete and update, but because of this stateless protocol we cannot hold that information. To overcome this statelessness of HTTP protocol, cookies are also used, but cookies has its own advantage and disadvantage. As you have seen in my previous video, that cookie is simply a textual information and it is always stored on a client side. So client has a total control of cookies. He can, as a client, he can see the cookie, he can delete the cookies. So to avoid this, we use sessions. Sessions are opposite of the cookies in the term they are stored on the server side machine. They can hold a complex data. In Java it can hold anything that inherits object. So I can store starting from a simple integer class or wrapper class to data to a object or itself beans object I can store. So pretty much the session can help us in helping us in building an application where we want to store the complex data structure about the user. And the best part is that it is maintained throughout the connection or throughout the transaction. So the user once login, I can connect it to the server and I can have its session and I can record each and every activity of that user using a session for which HTTP does not provide a direct information. There are three ways to manage a connect sessions, by using a cookie, by URL rewriting or hidden form fields. We should understand that when we are creating a session on a server, every session has an associated session ID with it, which is a unique identifier of that session. That unique ID is transferred back to the client, so whenever clients again come with that key, we can identify the session. It's like a lock and key kind of a structure where we have a unique keys and each key identifies a one log or one box or one session, and we can retrieve data once a client come with a key, so we can find out that its session exists on the server. Although we don't have to understand this much in a deep, because our Tomcat container or any container maintain this complexity of the session in a very well formed, and we are provided with a very nice and clean API to use the sessions. But just to understand how it is done, we will using these three techniques, we will see a very simple example. This is how a session is maintained. We create a unique string, we create a hash map, we stored session ID and session info in a table, and we create a cookie with, say for example, JSession ID, and bind it with a session ID. And this cookie is set to a path and is added to a response. So whenever a subsequent request comes, we can identify this session info using the cookie JSession ID. This is the one way by which cookie is used to maintain the session. If by chance the cookies are disabled, the second option is to use a UR rewriting, in which session ID is appended in the URL and it is transferred to the client. So whenever user again request, being this a part of query string, it is transferred back to a server and we can identify the session. But when we are using this kind of method for maintaining a session, we cannot have a static HTML pages, because we need, so this is a pretty much wrong over here, because I am showing it as an HTML. That is not possible, and this is because we have to append this using a programmatically that can be done by Java or a servlet or a JSP, so we cannot have a static HTML pages. We can use an hidden form fill, something like input type equal to hidden, name equal to session, and value equal to session ID. In this case also, because I have to append this dynamically into the HTML code, so I cannot have a static HTML page. I need to have a servlet or a JSP page. I cannot do this with an HTML page. So for maintaining sessions, these three techniques I use: cookies, URL rewriting, and hidden form fields. As far as our servlets are concerned, by default it is using a cookies method to maintain the session data. And now let us see how the session data are tracked. To use a session, we simply write http session equal to request.getSession. We are never going to create a new object over here. We are always going to use a request.getSession, because container or Tomcat creates a session for each incoming request. So we are simply saying that get that session. This will return a reference of a session object that we can use further on. It returns an attached session or creates a new session. If session does not exist, in that case it will create a new session. By default, get session takes an argument as the true. We don't specify it, that means it's true. We can write it like this: request.getSession false, which means return an attached session or return a null. It won't create a new session. And if we leave it blank, it will create a new session if old section does not exist. So if the session is exist, the JSession ID cookie is read and the data is found, and we can use it in further way. Now the next way is to looking up information associated with a session. We can use session.getAttribute key. If we want to look up into a session, it will return as an object, and we have to do a necessary typecasting. We cannot store directly a primitive data type in a session object in Java. Session.setAttribute is used to set the session with key and value. Value has to be of type object. Sessions objects have a built-in data structure, and this is normally a hash table in which you can store any number of keys and associated values. So setting is used by set attribute. It creates or replaces the key. If key already exists, it will replace or it will create a null. Value can be any object, no null or primitive. Serializable has to be there for if we are using a clustering kind of a stuff, but we are not going to bother it with right now. Discarding a session, you can remove attribute, you can invalidate sessions, and you can log out, which is support after Servlet 2.4 specification onwards. This is a simple way showing that how a session works. client going to request the data. Sorry, client will do a post request or a get request also can do with some data. If login is successful, then return a session ID in a cookie. I was going to send something like this to a client using a cookie. Because now this is a key, I have stored some data like its username, create date, expire date from the database into a session. Now there is a stateless, so new request will come with a session ID and I can just simply look up with a key and I'll find everything is available, so session is still valid and I can identify that this is a content for David and the same client is this, and this is the way it works. Thank you for watching my video. If you like the video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. For further assistance, you can always contact me on my email for detailed explanation if required. Thank you again.